Outdoor adventure won't wait for engine problems. Things like hard starts, rough performance, and lost fuel economy are often caused by fuel gum and varnish buildup. Seafoam can help your engine run better and last longer. Simply pour a can in your gas tank. Hunters and anglers rely on Seafoam to keep their engines running the way it should the entire season. Pick up a can of Seafoam today at your local auto parts store or visit seafoamworks.com to learn more.
There's nothing like snook hook sets at dawn or catching a tarpon in the moonlight. Find your next fishing trip made easy on fishingbooker.com and experience the magic of the Sunshine State or any other destination on your fishing bucket list. Book a blue water adventure in search of sailfish or go snapper fishing with the kids. With over 6,000 captains and trips to choose from, planning your next one just got a whole lot easier. Download the Fishing Booker app on the Google Play or App Store or visit them online at fishingbooker.com to book your trip today. You ever get that feeling the walls closing in, the concrete jungle suffocating you? You crave some wide open spaces, the chance to connect with nature, maybe in a spot all your own. Well, head over to land.com. They've got ranches, forests, mountains, streams, you name it. Search by acreage. You can search by location. You can search by the kind of hunting and fishing you're dreaming of. Land.com. It is where the adventure begins.
Welcome back to another episode of Cutting the Distance. I'm still in Kansas at turkey camp, but I wanted to take advantage of the opportunity to talk with my buddy Brock Shelton about whitetail deer hunting. He's one of those guys who may not have social media, he may not talk a whole lot about his success, but his wall of antlers tells me everything I need to know about if he knows what he's doing out in the woods. He's got a pile of big bucks to his name, and some of those are nearing that magical 200-inch mark, so I know he knows what he's doing out there. And to boot, he may just be the nicest guy ever. I've had the fortune of coming to Kansas for 4 years now, and Brock's always running dinner. He's got dinner on the smoker, running us here, running us there. So it makes me rethink how good of a guy I am being here in Kansas. I've had the chance to share a blind with them a little bit this week. We've talked a lot of hunting. We've talked about the history of the area and the, kind of the history of hunting in this area. And then we talked a lot about how he manages the properties for deer and turkey, amongst a bunch of other things. So I'm excited to get him here on the podcast. Welcome to the show, Brock.
Hey, thanks for having me, Jason.
Yeah. We've you were here from I believe the first time we showed up in Kansas. You were involved. We hunted with you a couple times then, and since we've been coming back deer hunting. So yeah, I think you had killed that. When did you kill that big buck? I'm not even going to guess.
I killed my largest one to date back in 2015. So it's been a few years back.
Gotcha. And that buck, I said nearing 200. I thought he might have made it. How big did that?
He was like 199 and change. So he was close.
Real close. Well, I'm gonna round up because that's the kind of guy I am. So you have a 200-inch buck too.
Thank you.
No, it was a giant buck. I think that first year I got to go over to Brock's place and check out his shop and those bucks and some of the big whitetails he had killed, and very impressive. And like I say, he's a quiet guy. Doesn't talk a whole lot about this or that or claim that he knows all this, but just talking with him, you get the idea that he knows a whole lot about whitetail hunting and pretty dang good at it. So like all episodes of Cutting the Distance, today I'm going to jump into listener question and answer, but we got a special version of the listener question and answer today. I just got my questions from Dirk Durham. He had 3 that he wanted me to throw at Brock, so we're gonna do it that way. But if you've got any questions of your own for me or my guests, feel free to email them to us at ctd@phelpsgamecalls.com or send us a message on social media, and we'll do our best to get them included here. So I'm gonna throw 3 questions here at you, Brock, that Dirk had. What is your opinion on scent control? Coming from the West, we're more of a get the wind at your face and you're good to go. We always use the old the saying like, oh, grandpa used to smoke and he's killed more elk or more deer than anybody we know. But we come out here, come out to the Midwest, and I think it's you're sitting in one spot, you're sitting in the stand. it becomes maybe more critical at this point.
Sure.
And so what's your opinion on that?
Yeah, it's always good to hear, some of you guys come in from other states and say how the wind's always blowing here, but having lived here my whole life, it's just another day. So we do play the wind. I always try to look at multiple weather stations or reports and try to play the wind and look at the wind. And I run a lot of cameras and I try to look at deer activity, and I won't go into a stand until the weather's in my favor. I don't want to go in there and let other deer know that I'm there, and also the one that I'm hunting, because you can mess up a stand just going in wrong one time.
Yep.
So it's very, very key to me. And you also play your thermals. Look at the thermals in the mornings. Of course, everything's rising. It helps you get away with a little bit more if there's little to no wind. But yeah, I also do scent control as far as the soaps, the showers, the laundering, and I don't dry anything in a dryer or anything with those earth scent sheets. I always put everything outside, dry them, and then I put them in like some carbon scent lock proof bags. And
Gotcha. So on scent control, on your wind, are your approaches to your stands even? We hear a lot of talk about that, like, you're hunting your stand, but then does your approach potentially, is half your property now scented up? Are you thinking, how does that approach affect how I'm going to get to that stand and where I think the deer are at that time?
Absolutely. Like access is key to me. I've actually acquired a few acres that adjoined our farm that allowed me more access to my farm. I can go in and out undetected, and I was able to do that before, but having the ability to purchase that just locked that up and allowed me to access to some of my better stands, and knowing that I'll always have that route now.
Yep. And I might be getting ahead of myself a little bit, but I want to keep kind of going on that. Do you typically hunt the perimeter of your farm, or do you have some stands or some ground blinds on the interior?
I typically hunt the way my farm or our farm is laid out. I typically hunt perimeters, and some of my perimeters that are in different areas of my farm, I will wait until the rut to hunt those stands, because just of where they are located. If I'm going in there, I'm going to spend all day in there. I'm not going to go in and send it all up and walk through everything for 2 hours of a set. So that's just my game plan, and it's worked for me in the past, so I try to stick to it.
Yep. And we'll get into it later. You got, Randy's one of your neighbors. We've had Randy on the podcast. We talk about the property we get to hunt here, and so we'll talk a little bit about having good neighbors and whether you don't want to mess up his hunt or where maybe his deer are coming from. So I know you guys probably coordinate there, and knowing your neighbor can be a big, because you're not fighting with your neighbor trying like, I don't care if I blow into him, I want the deer. So we'll get into that here in a little bit too.
I've always said a guy's hunting is only as good as his neighbors, because if your neighbor doesn't have the same game plan as you or management as you, say on deer age, you'll be letting 4-year-old deer pass all day and your neighbor's shooting them. So it's really good to have good neighbors like Randy, Rodney around us. My brother bought a farm across the road too, and everybody on the same game plan really improves everyone's hunting.
Yeah, I know Randy has an outfitter adjacent to one of his properties, and that always provide a little bit of headbutting there or management difficulties, because you're trying to grow big deer, hit an age class, but they're shooting any 3.5-year-old that ends up on the other side of the fence, which makes it a little tricky.
Yeah, it adds for some interesting talks in the evenings around at camp. So
Yep. All right, the second question from Dirk. How do you field judge deer, which has become important to me, and I've learned a lot, since I've been coming here, because Randy, as we just talked, you guys are trying to manage for 5.5-year-old deer primarily, but 4.5-year-old deer if the situation's right, or they're there, or maybe they want them out of the group, out of the herd. But how are you when you're in the stand, or when you're just scouting your property and looking at cams? Like, what's your go-to for field judging deer for age and, even, I guess, antler size as well?
Yeah, you can tell a lot by deer. I mean, a lot by the size. Like, you'll look at, say, the brisket in front. If you got a big brisket on a deer, it's kind of deceiving too with the belly on deers, because we do some supplemental feeding here, and so everybody around is feeding good. So you want to look at the whole picture, not just look at one and say, oh man, look how much mass he has. Well, it could be a good 4-year-old could be a giant if you let him
Yep.
go another year or
Yep.
two. And so cameras have helped a lot. There's been many deer that I've had pictures of, and I was like, I need to go see that deer in person, because a camera will give you a good idea, but seeing them in person, you can really judge them on the hoof better. And get your binoculars up, even if they're 25, 30 yards away. Look at them close. I mean, because once you pull the trigger on that release, there's no bringing it back. He's done. So,
yeah. And so, are you looking at like back line? Are you looking at belly line? Are you trying to look? Do you use like the face? Sometimes you'll start to look for Roman nose, or like just an old deer face. Like, one thing that I'm throwing a bunch of questions at you here at once. No. One other thing we've talked about, like growing up, you always talk about, oh, look at the mass on that buck. He must be ancient. But we've kind of learned, the more I learn, I'm like, well, that's just genetics to some point, or mom's health. So like, are there any other features? Face, horns, belly, back?
Yeah, you can look at the face. If it's a really old deer, their eyes will be sunken in. They'll be gray faced. It's a little harder to tell. Some are hair on them, but you can just tell. Like the deer I shot this past year, I mean, he was ancient. I mean, I had a better deer underneath me when I shot this old deer that I'm anxious to see. He made it through rifle season. I'm anxious to see what he's going to be like this next year. But and that's part of what we do, is kind of our community of neighbors here, that we'll shoot the older, mature deer rather than the one that would look better on the wall.
Yeah. And so I was going to roll that in. So if you see a 180-inch buck, but you only think it's a 4.5-year-old, are you letting it go, or are you shoot
he's getting a pass?
You're going to let a giant buck? Because I got to hunt my first year whitetail here. You guys had a 12-point running around that, and the pictures of him, and you guys sent me a trail cam pic, and I think it's an 8-point with him. And the 8-point is twice the body size of this little 12 body wise. And we got to see him the year after, and he grew up, and now he's kind of disappeared on you guys. Right. But it was one of those things, like that buck probably scored at one point there 160 inches, but you guys like, no, absolutely not. That could blow up into a monster. You guys were dealing with droughts, and you're like, we just want to get him on one good moisture year and some age. And so you guys are letting bucks that, anybody be happy to shoot walk.
And some people will find that hard to believe, but it was an easy move when your neighbors are going to do the same thing. It's just the right thing to do to grow bigger deer. You know?
And that's it's awesome. And like, I'm still struggling to comprehend it, because you guys are willing, like you guys are hunting and you guys love to hunt, but there's a side to it that's like trying to grow as big a deer as possible, which makes it pretty unique. Like, it's truly about how big a deer can our properties hold versus how big a deer can I shoot always.
Yeah. And that's Randy, my neighbor. That's one of the things we'll put in food plots and strategize even our farms together to raise the bigger deer. And it's worked out well. I mean, as well as it could be.
Yep. Wow. I'm sure we'll get into more of that on management and the food plots and stuff in our conversation a little later. So the third question from Dirk, what is your opinion on mock scrapes with human urine? And what's your opinion on that?
Yeah, we kind of laughed about this a little earlier. I've heard of that working before, and I've actually seen it firsthand. One time, I actually was hanging a stand one weekend. I think I was in college, and came back and was hanging a stand. And I had a buddy with me that had never really hunted much, and I turn around and he's over there relieving himself 10 yards from my new stand I'm hanging. I'm like, what are you doing? And I'm like going, man, I'm gonna have to let this cool off for a while. But the wind was right. The week later, when I came back, I think it was probably like the first or second week in November, and I came back and the woods were just tore up around that. So I'm sure, and I've read magazine articles and everything else where once that, not to get too scientific, ammonia or whatever it is that's coming off of the urine, it comes off of both humans and deer and then puts the aroma out. And it must have worked, because it wasn't that torn up a week prior when I hung the stand. So, but I typically, I don't do that. I'll do other methods. I'm trying to be as under the radar as I can. I don't try to leave any scent or leave anything behind. And
that's not necessarily as woodsman, but like you're going the extra step. Like you don't want to risk that it will work, but if it doesn't work, you don't want to risk that because Randy, our good buddy, like oh, you pee out of your stand, no need to get down, no need to bring a bottle. And to me, I'm like, but what if I drank some supplement or had some vitamins that like give an off scent and I don't want to risk it.
Or asparagus the night before, right?
No. It doesn't.
I always pack an empty bottle. I have one in my bag, just in case. I want to stack the deck in my favor.
Yeah. And then to piggyback on that, we noticed around here you guys use some of those big 1 inch, inch and a half ropes at your guys' scrapes. Can you, a little bit about that versus like using natural licking sticks or along the field edges?
Yeah, a lot of times we'll put cameras on those rope scrapes, and then also have them, within range of your stand. And what that does is you take a rope and you let it air out for a while, and it's an inch diameter, and then you can put some scent on it, and then the theory is every buck that comes around will smell that. It allows the wind to blow through it, and that rope holds the scent a little better. And we have seen a lot more activity on those scrapes. It holds better than a regular branch, I think. But it's just something else to have in your arsenal,
Yeah. Yeah, I appreciate you taking those questions from Dirk here. Once again, if listeners, if you have a question for me or my guest, feel free to email them to us at ctd@phelpsgamecalls.com or send us a message on social, and we'll do our best to get them included here. So now we're going to kind of jump into my discussion I wanted to have with you, Brock. And I'm still relatively new, so I preface this whole thing like I'd always joked I would hunt whitetail when I turned 70 and couldn't hunt mule deer and elk anymore and walk around. But got the invite from Randy a couple years ago, and I'm kind of hooked. It's new to me. It's still hunting, but it's a different game. It's a different chess match than we play with mule deer or elk or anything else that I hunt. So pretty new. But I wanted to kind of jump into I've got to talk to Randy about whitetail hunting, but haven't necessarily had you on and kind of see what you think about whitetail hunting. Growing up, it's what you see 90% on TV, and it's like, oh, this looks super simple. It's like the Drurys get up in a redneck popped up out in the middle of the field, and but as the more you learn, the more I'm here now for 2 years. Hopefully I draw a tag this year and come back for a third year. There's a lot involved. And you can't oversimplify it like, oh, a big buck just wants to breed, eat, and avoid conflict and exposure. But there's a lot more to this. You got to, try to get the deer to be that big to begin with. Number one. Number two, get them to an age, which you guys would talk about management. Number three, and then during hunting season, you have a chance to get to them. So there's a lot to it. Wind, sets, travel corridors, scouting, all of that. So I really kind of wanted to jump in and have a conversation with you. But what we're going to start with is more of that calendar of a whitetail hunter or a whitetail property manager, I guess, as well. And what are those major milestones throughout the year? So if we kind of just started in January, like what are you doing as a whitetail hunter? You live here, Randy, travels back and forth quite a bit, but like, are you doing anything in January, February, March?
Yeah, those early months, January, February, March, those are the months where I like to make sure that our deer herd has enough food to make it through the harsh weather. That's when I really start putting the men start putting the minerals out later in those months, but I make sure they have food, whether it be corn or other supplements. Nobody's hunting them. There's no pressure. I want them to feel safe on my farm. And what that also does, it allows me to then, ease around my property and look for travel routes. By this time, of course, all the vegetation's off. You can see deer trails, long ways away. Yeah. So it's nice to take a look at those and just get a feel for what the deer are doing now, because, you can have an ice storm or something and have limbs come down and it changes travel routes. And that's where you can really, as far as taking care of the herd, making sure they're being fed good, and then looking to see how they're moving. And that just gives you maybe an edge up come the fall, so.
Gotcha. Are you taking advantage of moving stands this time? Are you going to move? I hear a lot of people talk like February, March, April.
Yeah, I will get a stand site prepped. I'll have some limbs cut and do some stuff then. So then when it's time to hang a stand, I'll I'll usually wait till middle part of the summer, of course, probably when it's the hottest, and spray down good so you won't have ticks crawling all over you, and go hang that up. So all I have to do is really hang my ladder and put my lock on and ready to roll come middle of September.
So you're prepping those sites more so. And now, do you shed hunt your ground or your bedding areas? Or are you one of those guys that just wants to stay out of there all the time?
It's been since I've shed hunted my bedding area on our place. It's probably been 2 or 3 years. We have quite a few acres of row crop, so I'll check out the crop fields and then the surrounding areas around them. But I seldom go into the bedding area. But I know some guys do. I don't think it really at that time of year affects it too much. But if I was going to do that, I'd probably wait till I made sure that everything had dropped and before it started greening up. So you're talking, late February, early March, typically. So
just one day in there, one day in, one day out.
One or two passes through there and back through, and that way you're not running everything off.
Yeah, I get a little nervous. Me and Dirk were talking yesterday. We kind of trumped. We had some birds gobbling. We started with, and then up top, and I'm like, man, sometimes I wonder if we shouldn't just stay out of here, or not walking through here. But it's a dual purpose farm. You're hunting deer and turkeys, but sometimes you're like, are we messing anything up? Or if there's a big buck bedding in here, are we going to mess them up? And I don't know how much pressure you can put on them here, in the middle of April. Do they care by season, or does that like register with the big buck? Like, I got bumped here in April. Like, maybe this isn't as safe as I thought.
Yeah, I think in that time of year, to me, it doesn't affect them as much as, say, during the hunting season. I think they have a shorter memory than what a lot of people give them credit for.
Gotcha. Yeah, we had the night I shot my bird back there. We had a buck about 5 yards away from us, and you could see he was gonna, big bases already, and he was about this tall, and you're like, I hope that doesn't like mess him up. I'm sure it won't, but you just hope it doesn't make him feel he's not secure there. We've all seen plenty of gadgets and fads come and go, but here's one product that stood the test of time: Seafoam Motor Treatment. Lots of hunters and anglers know that Seafoam helps engines run better and last longer. It's really simple. When you pour it in your gas tank, Seafoam cleans harmful fuel deposits that cause engine problems. I'm talking common stuff like hard starts, rough engine performance, or lost fuel economy. Seafoam is an easy way to prevent or overcome these problems. Just pour a can in your gas tank and let it clean your fuel system. You probably know someone who has used a can of Seafoam to get their truck or boat going again. People everywhere rely on Seafoam to keep their trucks, boats, and small engines running the way that they should the entire season. Help your engine run better and last longer. Pick up a can of Seafoam today at your local auto parts store or visit seafoamworks.com to learn more.
There's nothing like snook hook sets at dawn or catching a tarpon in the moonlight. Find your next fishing trip made easy on fishingbooker.com and experience the magic of the Sunshine State or any other destination on your fishing bucket list. Book a blue water adventure in search of sailfish or go snapper fishing with the kids. With over 6,000 captains and trips to choose from, planning your next one just got a whole lot easier. Download the Fishing Booker app on the Google Play or App Store, or visit them online at fishingbooker.com to book your trip today. Hey, if you guys like to cook outdoors, and you oughta, you should check out the Weber Slate rust-resistant griddle. Now, this is a good innovation here, and it solves a real problem, okay? So this is a carbon steel cooktop that's safe for metal tools, like a griddle on your grill. It's pre-seasoned with food-safe oils and ready to cook on right out of the box. There's no use of coatings, okay? You can use metal tools to flip, press, and scrape without worry. It's the griddle that stays ready, not rusty. Now, the problem with griddles, everything rusts. No one talks about how bad everything rusts. The reason they don't, because they couldn't fix it until now. Well, Weber's new rust-resistant technology, your Weber grill will last for years. When used, the carbon steel griddle hardens and bonds the surface, reducing the ability for moisture to collect and rust to form. With the new Weber Works Prep, Cook, and Store system, you can keep cooking and cleaning supplies handy, carry food and condiments from the kitchen to the griddle, and even convert the side table into a prep station. Get fired up for your new Weber Slate rust-resistant griddle.
So when you talked earlier in the questions of the Dirk or in the intro, I can't remember, but you had a good buck last year that you passed. When will you like pick him up, or I mean, about what time? Is it May, June, horn size? You're like, all right, I got him, or is he going to be in the same area and confirm he's still alive?
It's funny because in years past, like the largest deer that I shot, I had pictures of him in a counter with him the year before on the total opposite end of the farm, diagonal end of the farm. I'm a big believer. I'll run cameras as much as I can. I may not in the summer months. I may not go in and check them for 2 months, but batteries are cheap in the whole scheme of things, even though they've gone up like crazy, like everything else. But we run some cell cams too, and there's not a lot of cell service on my farm, so I've got to pick and choose where I want to run those cameras so they're just not dying within a week. But and for the most part, he'll be close, and if he's on my farm, there's more than likely I'll have a picture of him, and then I'll start a game plan for that.
Yep. What's in your opinion? What's the likelihood that if a deer's been on your farm, he'll leave, or that if a deer wasn't on your farm, he kind of shows up? Or can you tell, like sometimes does a buck just blow up once in a year, like, hey, where'd this deer come from? Or did he come from some adjacent farm and just end up there? Yeah,
occasionally we'll have deer and like, man, we'll get, once again, we'll get with the neighbors and like, hey, do you have a picture of this deer? There's transparency between all of us as neighbors here. If we have a good deer, we're sharing it with the other guys. We're just as happy as if the other guy shoots it as we are. So that helps you too strategize, saying, hey, I had a picture of this deer last year, and he was 3.5 last year. He's only 4.5. We need to let him go another year. So they stay. I mean, and like I say, our farms together are what? There's probably 1,500 acres here.
Yep.
Over 1,500 acres that we're managing together. So that it's a unique situation.
Yep.
I'm blessed to be a part of.
Yeah. Good neighbors and similar management styles. Definitely help. Are you going to go out in the mornings or the evenings and let the binoculars do the work? Are you going to try to just leave those deer unpressured when they're getting a bite to eat out in the ag?
Usually, I'll take like we have mile sections around here. Usually drive around the evening times if there's soybeans out and take binoculars, and it's a fun activity right before dark to see what's around. The way our farm lies, it's kind of hard to do that because it's off the road a little way. So I typically don't do that much behind our place, but it's fun to see just a mile up the road. You can see some nice deer out on the bean fields in the evening before dark, and it's not that far to go, 3/4 of a mile, and they're on your place.
Yeah. And what time around here you guys' deer finished out, or you can start to figure out what's around?
Usually by middle part of August, they are what they are. You can see the bulbs on the end of the racks are thinning out, and they're basically size is done, and then they'll just wait for the velvet to fall off. They're in their bachelor groups. And
do those bucks that are running together, do they start to split at about that time when their velvet starts to fall, or they split before that here?
No, they'll still be together, and then after the velvet comes off, they'll start their pecking order. And
is it at the point where you try to start to figure out like where that big buck's wanting to hang, where he's bedding, where he's coming out? Is about that time, middle August? Or later?
Yeah, it's later than that.
So it's going to it's going to continue to change until what time?
I would say when they'll start losing their velvet, usually around first week, 2 weeks in September. I mean, you can still like that big deer I shot almost 10 years ago now. I was wanting to try to get him in velvet just because he was so impressive, and so he still was carrying velvet up in the middle of September. So it just varies a little bit, and I'm sure you've heard us talk about. We've had a deer here on our farm that was was in velvet year round too.
Yep.
It was kind of unique. So.
Yep. Gotcha. Is your opener always September 15th, or is it float on like a Saturday?
Man, I even if I'm after a good deer, it's usually in the middle of September. I don't know what day it usually falls on. I'm usually not
That excited.
yeah, I'm usually not biting my lip that anxious. But yeah, I just look at the website and see when first day we can go, and like I say, a lot of times, even if you have a good deer coming in, you'll look at the weather, and it's hard for me to get excited if it's 90 degrees, right? Like you're sweating, and I just don't want to mess up a good stand if I got a good deer coming
so
in.
you're gonna wait. So when are you gonna finally get in the stand? Whether if you got a great buck, is it when weather drops, cold front? Like when does Brock Shelton say, all right, I'm getting dressed up, I'm going up in the stand?
Yeah. First and foremost, I look to see if the wind's right. Like I don't mind setting on a stand if, I'm doing surveillance, and as long as the wind's right and I'm not messing up the farm or the stand. I'll look at the wind. I'll look to see the pattern of the deer. I do a lot of, I just watch the deer movement a lot by cell cams, and regular cams if I've been in there lately to pull the card. But you can, if you got a good deer coming into a spot, you don't want to go in there if he's not coming in. You want to play, like I say, I always say you want to put the cards in your deck over there. You want to make sure he's coming in. You want to make sure the wind's right, and it's always better if you got a front coming in. It's those are key factors, and you can get a lot of good movement that way.
Gotcha. So pre-rut, are you gonna, like October 15th, are you gonna start getting in the stand more and more? Is that pre, end of October rolls around, as long as the weather and the wind's right, you're gonna be out?
Yeah. I will. I'll look at my activity, and everybody talks about the October lull. Here in Kansas, the last couple years, it's been colder the first week in October than it has the first week in November, which is odd, So, yeah, I can remember, on November, I think 7th, a couple of years ago, I guess it would have been in 2020, shooting a buck, and it was 70 degrees. I was in a long sleeve t-shirt was all, but October, you can have some deer starting to move, but yeah, but if you got a cold front coming in, they'll really pick up the pace a little bit. Yeah. So I just watch and see what the deer are moving on cameras, and I'm real big, and if nothing's moving, I don't want to go in there and stink up a stand.
Gotcha. So you'll wait until he shows on that area.
Yeah, and there's usually enough stuff to do around the farm that I can keep busy and wait until everything's right and in my favor.
Gotcha. And then if you still have a tag as you get towards that peak, maybe I'll ask, like, is there a favorite time, or is it just when that weather and that cold front with the right wind and the movements there? Is that really doesn't matter as long as those three things are there?
Yeah, I think weather is huge. I think it plays a huge part on a lot of things, and I just try to stack everything I can in my favor, whether it be the wind, the temperatures. There's so many factors, and all that helps you, and it gets the deer up on their feet earlier too, right? If it's colder, they got to get up, they got to go feed. So I know it's kind of generic, but if there's no movement, I don't want to go in there.
No, it's fair. I mean, sometimes we get accused of like oversimplifying calling elk or what we do. I'm like, no, you got to find them, you get close, you get the wind right, and you hunt them. So no, I completely understand. It's like, you need the movement, you need the deer, obviously. You need the wind to be right, and then you need that little weather that maybe gets them on their feet earlier, gets them to the food, before it gets dark or whatever it may be. With that weather, is there something you prefer? Do you like the very first 12 hours of a cold front? Is it the first 24, 48? Like, if there was like an optimal time in your opinion, like what part of that weather change is it that's better than the rest?
I've always said, and Randy and I've talked about this a little bit, my neighbor, that first cold front in season, when season starts, deer are going to be moving, and it just gets them on their feet. It lets them know that, hey, it's getting close, and So I've always had great success, even just seeing a lot of deer. That first cold snap of the fall, that it just seems to like trigger things and get things moving. I really enjoy that, and you know that goes back to the big deer that I shot. It was October 1st, and it dropped down to 40 degrees that night. Which is pretty moderate, but it was colder than what it had been, and the timber was just alive that morning.
Does it matter if it's when you say cold front, are we talking like a 10-degree drop, or are we talking like a 20 or 30-degree type drop?
Usually 20 degrees. If you can get a 20-degree drop, you'll just get that much more movement.
Yeah. The colder, the bigger differential, the better there.
Yeah, the bigger the delta T, the better.
So, now, are you not to keep harping on this question, is like the first 24 going to be better than like the fourth day of a cold front or the third day of a cold front, or are they all pretty equal once you just get that switch?
I like the first because it's kind of a shock to them, and by the fourth day they know that, hey, I'm going to have to feed more, which is still good, but that first is, it's just, they're like, hey, this is the kickoff, right? We need to get up and get moving, and
yeah. Okay, so we talked, the lull a little bit, that pre-rut, peak rut. If you still have a tag, you're playing the same thing. You need the movement, or you just, even without the movement, now you're going to be out there because it is so chaotic.
Yes. So I've always said, when I was younger and didn't have cameras everywhere and cell cameras, I loved the first week in November, because you had deer running around. They were looking for the doe that was in. And as I've gotten older and I guess been around the deer herd longer, now I say the rut is the best time if you don't have a deer to hunt, because then you might have the neighbor's deer over on you. I say that, and I know what the neighbors have, but we share pictures. But some of these other guys that are hunting 80 or 160 acres, if you don't have a good deer on camera, I'd say the rest of the time you need to be hunting, because the neighbor's deer may be chasing one of your does back over on your farm, and you've got a nice mature deer in front of you.
Yeah. Last year when we were here, so the first year we came, we were more of that pre-rut, maybe just getting towards the peak, early first week in November. Last year we came, I don't remember that we were here on the 15th and went right up until Thanksgiving, maybe the 23rd. And I decided I don't like the peak rut as much as the pre-rut, because everything was either running by it at 30 miles an hour, or they had a doe pushed up in some little nook or cranny and he just wasn't going to leave it. And so you had a lot of, small to medium bucks on their feet, but those big bucks were all kind of, in that lockdown phase, and we weren't seeing a lot of movement last year, right in the smack dab of that rut.
Yeah, that happens. The big deer will have run off all the little deer, and the little deer are running around looking for the next doe that the big deer's let go. But it can be very difficult. It can be frustrating. I mean, there is no pattern during the rut, as you guys know. Yeah.
Do you lose some of your big deer off of cameras for 2 or 3 days during the rut, or maybe for weeks at a time? They're just you don't know where they're at on your farm, or
you think they're not moving, but they're moving. It's just in a little 300-yard area, because they've got a doe. They're tending a doe, and I've seen a buck push a doe up against a rock wall fence and keep her there all day, and I'm like, well, looks like I'm hunting all day, because he's 80 yards away, and I'll wait on him. So
it was crazy. We had a buck across the road here in front of Randy's, and all of a sudden you ended up way over by your house, and it's just, that's the kind of movement you'll get. Like, it just happenstance that Randy owns both pieces, or has the ability to hunt both pieces of property. But if that wasn't both of your pieces, like, you would have got a giant off of your neighbor, that's a mile away.
Yes.
Which is a good thing, but it's also a bad thing if you have specific deer on your property, but you may not have access to them because now they're, stuck on does all day.
Well, and then I think a lot of guys too, I mean, everything happens so quick. Like we've talked about before, you can spend all year doing food plots, doing everything else, and it comes down to a split 10 seconds. You got to make a decision, and cameras have helped with that, because the deer, the characteristics, like, oh, he's got a kicker off this G2. That's this deer. I know he's 5 years old, but on deer that you don't have any history with, and he's coming by, like you say, running Mach 3 by your stand, you've got to make a quick decision whether, hey, is this an old deer or a young deer? And that's probably the hardest thing I feel about the rut is making decisions on deer that you don't have a history with,
Yeah. In your opinion, like if you had to put a percentage to it, how many of you, and you guys have, I'll paint the picture. You guys have what I would say very well maintained and managed farms, right? You have the food, you have the fall food, you have the spring food, you have the bedding. How many percent of your deer do you lose during the rut? Do you think, half of your bucks leave, or 20% of your bucks leave, or hardly none? Or do you guys get more during the rut? Can you put a number to that? Or
we have a lot of does too on our farms, and we've been trying to manage that and bring that number down a little bit. But I would venture to say that it's hard to put a number on how many you lose, because a lot of times they're making big circles. They can be on, like for instance, they could be on Randy's farm in the morning and mid morning on our farm, and they could just make a big loop, and they're just
running.
It's a big draw in between us, so it's hard to put a number, but yeah, they're running all over crazy.
So is it best just to assume they're around? Like, is that the mentality you have to go there? Like, I'm going to hunt this buck. If I got the right wind, there's always a chance during that peak rut that he's there.
Yeah, especially during the peak rut when, it's hard to pattern or do anything rational with them because they're just all over the place.
Gotcha. Well, that's kind of, and then going into the last part would be late season. You guys go all the way to the end of December. If you, for some reason, still have your tag, which typically you don't have your tag at that point, but what's the hunting look like there? Is it back to food source as soon as that rut's over?
Yeah, they're back on food. If you've got standing soybeans or corn, standing corn, where you can go in and bush hog some of it off, they'll be piling in like by the groves. Food is key. Those bucks are trying to put weight back on, and then those does too. They've been being chased around everywhere. They're looking for food, and everybody's coming back into the food.
So
food's
they're
key.
Looking for a big ag, and then something that is legal in Kansas is supplemental feeding. Whether it's protein feeders or corn. I call them the corn spinners, whatever they are. You guys, do some of that supplemental feeding. How do you what's your opinion? I know you said back in the day you didn't do very much of it at all versus like where it is today. Maybe I'm gonna turn this conversation, not necessarily whether it's good or bad, but how do you think it affects the deer? Is it ultimately good? Is it maybe, are there some negatives, or is it maybe just a net neutral, but it does make sure that the deer go into the winter healthier? Like, what's your opinion on this, feeding?
Well, it's kind of a double-edged sword, because you have, say you have a farm and all your neighbors are feeding. If you aren't feeding, your deer numbers are going to be significantly reduced, because it's like going to a buffet or going to having to order one burger at a time. You're going to have to do it just to maybe keep up and have a whole block of guys doing it. Kind of keeps everything together. I use it more as a supplemental. I don't necessarily hunt over it, because it's just not what I enjoy doing. I'd rather go into the timber, but I also think it's beneficial for the deer herd as a whole. I know, as far as it's not just corn, we're putting out minerals, proteins, trying to make the deer healthier. So I think overall it's a positive. At first I was hesitant to do it, but I think overall it's a positive. I've seen our deer become healthier. That's just my take on it.
I think it's supplemental, right? You guys still have the food plots, you guys still have the good ag, you still have the great underbrush. These deer can browse all day long. That's just more of a supplement, to add that back into their diet and kind of boost it. So there's still everything else they need here. They would survive without it, but it is making them healthier, getting into the winter.
Right. Because I'm in the belief that I don't think big deer like coming to feeders. So that's just my belief, and I'll hunt those deer on other parts of my farm and just supplemental feed the does and the younger deer.
Yeah, we've hunted around them, on the super cold mornings where I'm not in the stand. You're in the redneck because you're going to freeze to death. And the does may come in, the fawns may come in, but those bucks are like scent checking that 200 yards off, seeing if there's anything there. And then you'll catch a glimpse of them cruising through, but they're very reluctant to ever come into that thing.
But they'll feed all day out in a food plot. That's what, Randy really got me involved with the food plots. Before I dabbled in it, and here's some, we were planting beans that year. Our farmer was planting beans. I'd try to have clover in there and have it for a couple, 3 years, and just trying to diversify the food. But with Randy, we've taken it up a notch or two as far as the food plot programs and providing more food for the deer throughout the whole year.
Yeah. I got to ride around with him there a couple of days ago, and we sprayed your honey hole with. I think we killed the winter wheat and all the broadleafs, and so I love that part of it. Like, you are doing work, and the work results in that clover. That I'm sure within a couple weeks that clover will be doing better, and you get a good rain, and that clover is going to fill that whole entire food plot in.
Yeah, we killed that winter wheat and put down some fertilizer for that white clover, and should be, like you say, a couple, 3 weeks. We're expecting rain this week, so it should really pop up. And Randy and I have always said, this is what's fun, is doing all the food plots and the prepping and, getting everything ready. And the icing on the cake is, having big deer there, and then the ability to harvest them too.
We've all seen plenty of gadgets and fads come and go, but here's one product that stood the test of time: Seafoam Motor Treatment. Lots of hunters and anglers know that Seafoam helps engines run better and last longer. It's really simple. When you pour it in your gas tank, Seafoam cleans harmful fuel deposits that cause engine problems. I'm talking common stuff like hard starts, rough engine performance, or lost fuel economy. Seafoam is an easy way to prevent or overcome these problems. Just pour a can in your gas tank and let it clean your fuel system. You probably know someone who has used a can of Seafoam to get their truck or boat going again. People everywhere rely on Seafoam to keep their trucks, boats, and small engines running the way that they should the entire season. Help your engine run better and last longer. Pick up a can of Seafoam today at your local auto parts store or visit seafoamworks.com to learn more.
There's nothing like snook hook sets at dawn or catching a tarpon in the moonlight. Find your next fishing trip made easy on fishingbooker.com and experience the magic of the Sunshine State or any other destination on your fishing bucket list. Book a blue water adventure in search of sailfish or go snapper fishing with the kids. With over 6,000 captains and trips to choose from, planning your next one just got a whole lot easier. Download the Fishing Booker app on the Google Play or App Store, or visit them online at fishingbooker.com to book your trip today. Hey, if you guys like to cook outdoors, and you oughta, you should check out the Weber Slate rust-resistant griddle. Now, this is a good innovation here, and it solves a real problem, okay? So this is a carbon steel cooktop that's safe for metal tools, like a griddle on your grill. It's pre-seasoned with food-safe oils and ready to cook on right out of the box. There's no use of coatings, okay? You can use metal tools to flip, press, and scrape without worry. It's the griddle that stays ready, not rusty. Now, the problem with griddles, everything rusts. No one talks about how bad everything rusts. The reason they don't, because they couldn't fix it until now. Well, Weber's new rust-resistant technology, your Weber grill will last for years. When used, the carbon steel griddle hardens and bonds the surface, reducing the ability for moisture to collect and rust to form. With the new Weber Works Prep, Cook, and Store system, you can keep cooking and cleaning supplies handy, carry food and condiments from the kitchen to the griddle, and even convert the side table into a prep station. Get fired up for your new Weber Slate rust-resistant griddle.
One other quick question on the food plots. You own the farm, you and your brother and sister own the farm, right?
Yes.
But you're kind of at the mercy of the farmer, right? Your ag fields are, does that ever, you're like, darn it, I should have just planted those myself this year. Because this year you got stuck with Milo, right? Which is basically not going to be to your benefit hunting.
I've been doing a little research. I think Milo has a little, like a 2-week window where it's very, very palatable. And I've seen this, with neighbor raising Milo before. So it just makes it that much critical that our other food plots are doing well enough to sustain and provide as long as they can.
So will that make your the honey holes maybe an acre, maybe a little over an acre of plant?
Couple acres, yeah.
So is the honey hole, do you feel that that'll be that much better because that's going to be maybe more of a isolated, concentrated food source versus your other 100 acres of being maybe not as palatable.
Yeah, I think it will help. I think it'll definitely pick up the traffic in there because, like I say, deer will eat milo, but it's definitely not the 100 acres of soybeans we usually have in there.
Or a good fall source, right? Because it's going to be palatable when it sprouts, which is going to be what, May, June when it's.
Yeah, it should be. I'm trying to think when that milo. He's already got it in the field, so it'll start sprouting in the next probably after this rain.
Yeah, as soon as it gets some rain. So, one other thing why we're talking about food management is water. You guys are coming at what, 2 or 3 year drought, pretty severe drought.
Yeah.
This year there's water in these creeks that we've never seen water in before. That haven't flowed for years.
Yeah.
Do you feel that water will? I mean, the deer have always had water, but does that water? It's greener here than I've ever seen. Is that gonna add on 5-10% to the deer, or is it just going to be good overall?
I think that will help. It's getting us into these late spring, early summer months. If we can keep the water flowing in the creeks, I think that will help us too with like the, not losing deer, that like we have in the past, so.
Yeah. One thing we always love it doesn't make the hunter, but it makes the hunting easier. Let's just go into like specific whitetail hunting gear. We hunt elk, you hunt, my bow setup, my broadheads are picked for elk and this or that. So, whitetail hunting specific gear, like what's your archery equipment look like? Are you using expandables? You're shooting a lighter setup? Are you still going heavy?
I've always, as a younger guy, I chased speed years ago, and I still like a decent speed bow. And so my setup is pretty light. I think my arrow and broadheads way around the 380 grain, 385 grain. They're light.
So ultra light for the Western guy, right?
Yes. Yeah. They're super light. I draw back 63 pounds. But I've always been a shot placement guy. And I'd rather not have to judge distance too much. Now then, I'm older and I've got pretty much my stand sights nailed down. I could probably go hunting without a rangefinder, but I always like taking my rangefinding a couple, 3 trees, areas around. So when the heat of the moment, something came by, I didn't have to judge distance too much because it was pretty flat shooting bow, shooting over 300 feet per second with the way you're set up. And I do shoot mechanical broadheads. The deer I shot this last year was just an 1.5 inch mechanical broadhead. Don't have any tuning issues with it that way. And it's worked, it's just worked for me in the past. And so I'm one of these guys, if it's working for me, I don't really want to change it,
Yeah. No, and that's, you're not trying to get through an elk, broadside, or, if you make a mishap and, hit a bone. So, I mean, whitetail, I've always been a solid guy, but you always wonder like, hey, it is Kansas. It's windier than I've ever, so it's like, man, it might be nice to shoot a little expandable, maybe get a little less, head drift and, all of that. But, I've had great success with the solid iron wheels here, but it's always like, man, it would be nice to have an expandable for these things.
Yeah, in the past, I actually even shot an 1.75 inch mechanical broadhead, and it's shot placement is key. The big deer I shot, I watched it fall over. The deer this last year, I hunt thick enough brush. I didn't get to see him fall over, but he went 15 yards. So shot placement is key, and if you're able to put it where you want to, and I won't. If anything's questionable, I won't take the shot. That's just me. I'm pretty cautious and pretty safe guy that, like going back to that one deer I shot, I waited till he turned broadside. It was 13 minutes. So it was a long 13 minutes, but it was a solid 13 minutes looking at my watch. So, I just think you need to be patient and not rush it because you owe the animal that. So,
I was going to go back. You should still bring a rangefinder in the stand. I know you do, in case you have to stand on your tree stand seat and shoot out the back where you've never even thought about shooting before.
Yeah, that happened the year before last. That was a mishap. That the first shot, the deer was close enough that my top cam actually hit my bow holder, and so it forced my arrow to shoot underneath of him. And I was actually going to let him go. I'm like, well, it's not meant to be, And then I looked, and he was still standing there, and I saw him dripping blood, and I had actually just grazed his belly, and I saw that I needed to do the right thing and finish him off. So I actually did some things I probably wasn't supposed to do. I stood on my seat and shot through a fork through the back of the tree. So, but
the funniest thing is I got to hunt that stand that night or the next day or something. Yeah. And I'm not, still new at this whole tree stand thing. It takes me a little bit to get comfortable. And I get up this thing and the ladder, I'm going to explain this story. So his steps to get on this stand are these circle steps, which basically you have to stand you have to put your toe against the tree. So you've got about an inch that you're hanging on to.
Yeah.
And so first of all, I'm not real comfortable getting up there. And then when you get to the stand, you realize that the thing's 15-degree angle into the tree?
It's leaning back. It's a comfortable stand to sit in. It's leaning back a little ways.
So I get up and they're not being super comfortable. And I'm like, and then he tells me, like, when you get up there, stand in the seat and look through the back fork where I shot. And I'm like, I'm not moving. I don't even know how I'm going to shoot a deer out of this. But it was funny. I think you told us the reasoning was you made it so sketchy that your brother wouldn't want to hunt your best stand.
Yeah. Sorry, Britt. No. And it's one of those where, we do run safety lines, but I mean, it is one of those deals where I probably need to reevaluate that. That's the tree that stand needs to be in, and
it's just not straight.
It's just not straight. So, but they make some stands now that you can level up and do stuff, and that's probably something I'll probably end up doing this year is getting a better stand in there. But
yeah, because that morning, my very first day in the stand, I had hunted out of a Millennium that had like some side rails. Mm-hmm. Well, this is just a little teeny foam seat with no side rails, and you're leaning wanting to lean past the tree, and I'm like, wasn't real comfortable. But that's a great segue into my next question. Would you prefer to be in a tree stand or a ground blind?
Tree stand every day of the week. I've tried hunting out of a blind, and it just seems like there's too many spots you can't see, blind spots. And if you have the right gear now, you can stay out there in some pretty harsh elements. Yep. And I really enjoy. I just think you see more. You can watch the birds, the squirrels more. And now, don't get me wrong. There's some days I'd rather be in a blind when it's 20 degrees and the wind's blowing 30. So
no, I'm with you. I some of Randy's good sets are a redneck or a ground blind or an elevated ground blind. And I feel like, everything's got to be perfect. A deer's got to stand in this like 5-6 foot window where when I'm in a tree stand, I can shoot 330 degrees around the tree. And I feel like I'm not going to get picked off as easy. They're not looking at me. I feel like sometimes those blinds, they know they're there and you get those does bobbing their head trying to see if they'll catch you move. And you're like, they know something, you're just hoping that everything goes right.
Well, and with my luck, I mean, even hunting out of the tree, my top cam still hit a little bow holder that's like sticking out 3 inches from the tree. So who knows what I would hit shooting out of a blind.
The buck I killed this year, trying to shoot out the front window of a redneck because he was out front, but really close, like 12, 13 yards. My stabilizer, being a Western guy, I shouldn't even have had a stabilizer, but I just put my bow together when I got here, lift my bow up, the stabilizer, ka-tunk, right off the front. Thankfully, he was so locked in on that doe, he didn't care, but just stuff like that, like the blind. Like, guess what? If I wasn't in the blind, my stabilizer would have been just fine. So clothing, you kind of hinted to that. Like, there's good stuff out there. Like, are you after anything specific? You just want to be quiet and warm, comfortable. Like, what are you looking at when you decide what you're going to wear to get through a hunt?
Yeah, I run merino base layers, and then I layer accordingly. I mean, so much has changed in the last 20, 25 years since I started bow hunting. As far as, it's like, man, to stay warm, you used to have to look like the Michelin Man. You'd be going through the woods. If you fell down, you wouldn't be able to get up, type of deal. Now then, all this stuff, you can layer up and really not be bulky or anything at all. Pretty comfortable. And so I'll run merino base layers and then alternate some tops and bottoms. Everything's insulated now, and it's really changed.
Yeah. So you just want to be quiet.
Quiet is my biggest deal. Yeah. And to me, that's the greatest enjoyment out of bow hunting. Probably is being close enough to a mature deer and him not ever knowing you're there. Yep. So that's, to me, that's pretty neat task.
Yeah. And you won't insult me on this question. I want your honest answer. I know you're paying a lot of attention to patterning deer and where you think they are. Calling in decoys, like, will you run a call? If so, which one and how often and when? And then will you ever use a decoy, or are you just not wanting to kind of what's your take there?
A lot of that depends on the situation. Like if I'm after a particular deer and I know he's in the area, I don't want him to know that I'm there. So I'll be quiet. Now, say it's during the rut and I don't have a mature deer on camera that I want to hunt. That's when if nothing's around, I'll do the rattling sequence, couple grunts, and I want to see what's in the area because I don't think I have anything that's mature enough to shoot, say. So I'm going to try to pull something from somewhere else to see, hey, maybe they've got a deer that's bigger, you know?
Yep. Yeah, that's the one I tend to call. Like if first thing in the morning, there's good movement, or you keep quiet. But it's when, all right, I've been on the stand for 30 minutes, an hour, and nothing's going on. Crank up the calls a little bit. Or if you do see a buck passing by outside of shooting range, like it may be a last ditch effort. But I don't have the luxury you do. Like maybe if I knew I can go hunting every day or go back out, like maybe like you said, I wouldn't be as apt to call. I would just stay quiet. Like he'll eventually come by, because if I spook him out of that tree and he picks me off, now I've just screwed this place up. Maybe.
Yeah. And there's a lot. I mean, I've called in deer before. I've called in a deer that's on my wall with the doe bleat and a buck grunt, and I didn't have any pictures of him before. It was November 10th years ago, and he was just shy 170. I mean, it was a great deer, and called him in. It works. There's no doubt. And if you're hunting all day and it's boring, it's in the middle of the day, it's something to pass the time by, right? You might get something and you can learn. Say it's only a 3.5-year-old, but you can learn how he reacts and where he's coming from, and it might help you out down the road.
Yeah, I mean, we in that pre-rut year, I think it was November 5th or 6th when we had got here and hunted, and we hit the rattle bag out here behind Randy's, and 3 bucks came flying in. And, so it's like it gave you an opportunity. Now maybe would a mature buck come? I don't know, but those 3 bucks that were more of that 3.5-year age came kind of screaming in, and ultimately a big buck did come in an hour later. So did he hear that? Was he going to come to that location anyways? But yeah, when one else is cooking, like what do you have to lose? It's a natural sound. Try it. But where we're grunting at bucks out at 800 yards away, where you have the chance to come back, like you're like, I'm still not going to blow on it. Like he'll eventually come by here and make a mistake.
Yeah. It all depends on the situation, right? Like it just, you don't want to, like if you're hunting a particular deer and he's going to come by that tree, I would probably tend to be quiet. But if it's middle of the rut and you're looking for some action, by all means, deer are vocal. They'll respond and check things out.
Gotcha. All right, we're gonna wrap this up, but I want you to give us, like, in your opinion, like what's one mistake that whitetail hunters make every year that if they avoided, they'd find more success. That maybe something that's taken as the right thing to do, or maybe mistakes that people made, or maybe you made earlier on in your hunting that you kind of cleaned up.
Yeah, and man, putting me on the spot, but I think I know my answer on that one is going to be people hunting when the everything's not perfect, or I don't want to say perfect, but not in their favor. I mean, you may be doing more harm. Like I used to have to take a week off when I didn't live here. I would have to take a week off and come down and hunt. Well, I thought, man, I need to be in the tree stand every waking minute.
Yeah.
Well, there's sometimes you're doing more harm than good if you're in the tree stand. If the wind's not right, if you're going in at the wrong time and bumping stuff, I think sometimes you're better off. Say the wind's not right for the stand where you're hunting a particular deer and you don't have another stand to go to. You're better off sleeping in that morning and going that night.
Yeah, waiting for the wind to change. No, I can't agree enough. Like it's your answer, but we're the same boat. We get 1 week, and so I'm speaking for Randy, but I feel like sometimes he feels pressure, like he's got to have us in a stand morning and night, and sometimes we're like, I think we're risking it, or and that's the case. Like if he had a target deer and there a big deer he wanted to kill, or one of you guys or a buddy, it's like, man, we could be really hurting this area, but we needed to be there, and so yeah, I think. Especially if you were targeting like a specific deer, it may just be best to stay out until you get the right wind.
Yeah, and that's key too. Is I think to maybe try to avoid that is maybe have some stands set up for all the different wind scenarios. Access to those stands. But I think that's probably one of the bigger mistakes that a lot of guys make is hey, I'm here. I need to be doing this. I need to be in the stand. I'm not going to kill him from the couch.
Yeah.
Well, that's true, but you're not going to kill him if the wind's wrong either.
Yeah. Well, this conversation brought up one more question I wanted to ask you. In your opinion, on a big mature deer, do you have to give him any wind, or will he eventually make a mistake and go against the wind when he like comes from bedding to feeding? You know what I mean? Like,
yeah. I think your opportunity's better if he thinks the wind's in his favor and it's 5 to 10 degrees
out of his favor. So you're hunting a pretty, I don't want to say questionable wind, because you just said you're pretty risk adverse. Mm-hmm. You don't want to screw it up, but you're going to wait. You're going to go out there and like, all right, it is a true east, and I think he's going to come from the south. So or even less. Like, I'm going to give him as much wind as he thinks he needs, but he's not going to catch me because I'm going to kill him before he catches me.
Before he gets to my wind cone, I'm going to kill him. And they're apt to move more if they think the wind's in their favor.
Yep.
And you just tricked them by having your tree or your stand in the right tree, because we kind of go back to that tree stand where you kind of feels like you're laying in a lazy boy tilting back. That's the tree it needs to be in. I mean, there's
if you're one more tree down, they'd catch you before you could shoot.
Yeah, and granted, like I say, I'll be fixing that tree stand, but it's in the location it needs to be in.
Yep.
So, and it's just details like that you pay attention to over the years. When I was younger, when I was 25, I wouldn't have been paying that close attention to things. You learn things as you get older, or you should be, and you realize like, hey, I need to pay more attention to this. This is what's happening. You have more experience, and I think they just move better when they think the wind's in their favor, but you got them.
Yeah, so your route in safe, your tree stand safe to a certain degree, but you better not let him get, if you're going to kill him, you better not let him get past a certain area.
Yeah.
And that is tough, because that same tree we hunted out of, I did have some does come out first. I'm like, now they've got me. But if it was a buck, I could have killed them. So you're hoping like they get out of the field, get out of my way. And then, if it was a buck, you'd have to shoot them before they got there. So you are letting little bucks into your wind cone, but you're kind of crossing your fingers that you'd kill the big guy before he got through there.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I really appreciate having you on here, Brock. It's a great conversation. Like I say, I really enjoy talking hunting with you. It's, you're a great, land manager. You guys got some giant bucks around here. Great turkey hunting. And so I tip my hat to everything you guys are doing for the whitetail deer here in Kansas. And like I say, a wealth of knowledge. You guys won't be able to go check him out on social media to check out all of his bucks or his turkeys and what he's got going on, but you're just gonna have to trust me on this one, that the guy, he knows what he's doing in the whitetail woods. So I really appreciate having you on, Brock.
Thanks for having me, Jason. Enjoyed it.
Yeah. Take care.
Thanks.
Outdoor adventure won't wait for engine problems. Things like hard starts, rough performance, and lost fuel economy are often caused by fuel gum and varnish buildup. Seafoam can help your engine run better and last longer. Simply pour a can in your gas tank. Hunters and anglers rely on Seafoam to keep their engines running the way it should the entire season. Pick up a can of Seafoam today at your local auto parts store or visit seafoamworks.com to learn more.
Hey, everybody knows Weber grills. I've been using Weber grills my whole life, and check it out. They got a pellet grill, the Weber Searwood pellet grill. Now, with a pellet grill, you can smoke, roast, and sear on the same grill. You can go from low and slow, on smoke boost mode, or crank this thing all the way to a heat sear at 600 degrees. It's got a full great sear zone, so you can put more food on the flame. Get fired up for your new Weber Searwood pellet grill.